Prince Harry's worst nightmare just came true. In a shocking revelation, the late Queen's will was read aloud, and it left Harry with absolutely nothing, no properties, no funds, nothing but heartbreak. Today, the world watched in disbelief as Prince William finally read out the late Queen's will. What he revealed stunned the royal family and the world. Harry, once the favored son, has been officially disinherited, while William inherits vast estates and unimaginable wealth. Was this the Queen's final act of silent disapproval towards Harry's shocking decisions? Stay tuned as we dive into the explosive details of a royal betrayal that will rock the monarchy to its core. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What would you do if your own grandmother publicly rejected you from beyond the grave? These chilling words echoed through the lavish halls of Buckingham Palace as Prince Harry stood rigid, his face drained of color, eyes reflecting disbelief and shock. It was a moment so raw, so utterly devastating, it brought silence to every soul gathered within those royal walls. In a single instant, Prince Harry's world fractured, his expectations shattered, replaced by a harsh reality he was utterly unprepared for. It was supposed to be just another official royal gathering, another solemn yet predictable event where dignitaries and royals met, exchanged pleasantries, and departed. But no one, not even the most astute palace insiders, anticipated the bombshell that lay dormant in the carefully sealed envelope held by Prince William. With every heartbeat pounding harder in Harry's chest, the envelope seal broke, and the life-changing words were read aloud. Prince William's voice echoed clearly and distinctly through the ornate chamber, a chilling calm masking any emotions that may have roiled beneath the surface. I, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, Queen of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms, do hereby declare this to be my final testament. The heir to the throne announced. The atmosphere inside the room became unbearably tense, every breath suspended, as the assembled royals and close confidants awaited the Queen's final wishes. William continued, his voice unwavering, until he reached the moment that forever altered the royal family. To my beloved grandson, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, I leave nothing. Gasps filled the chamber, blending into a cacophony of whispered disbelief and astonishment. Palace staff, usually impeccably composed, exchanged stunned glances. Harry, whose heart was already strained by years of emotional turmoil within his family, felt his pulse quicken. A palpable anger swirled within him, barely contained beneath a veneer of royal decorum. Beside him, Meghan Markle's grip tightened on his arm, her eyes wide with shock and indignation. Across from them, Prince William stood motionless, reading the rest of the will with meticulous precision. As he listed each estate, each royal residence, each parcel of land and generous fortune bestowed upon him, Harry's mind raced. What had he done to deserve such harsh judgment from the grandmother he once adored? The very woman who had lovingly guided him through grief and loss, now seemingly condemned him from beyond the grave. Harry could barely process the torrent of emotions that surged through his body: confusion, humiliation, sorrow, and above all, a white-hot anger that threatened to erupt at any moment. Yet, even amidst his emotional tempest, Harry knew one thing clearly: this was no spontaneous act. The Queen, known for her reserved demeanor and unflappable poise, would never have made such a decision without careful, deliberate consideration. This was not merely a passing moment of disapproval. This was a calculated message intended to reverberate throughout generations. Speculation and whispers had long followed Harry, especially since he and Meghan dramatically stepped back from their royal duties and relocated to the United States. But never before had the Queen's disapproval been expressed so clearly, so irrevocably. Media pundits immediately began dissecting this stunning revelation, theorizing about what triggered such a dramatic gesture. Was it Harry's highly publicized break from tradition? His critical comments during explosive interviews that exposed sensitive royal family matters? Or perhaps something deeper, an unresolved issue that had privately simmered for years, now surfacing explosively through the words of a departed monarch? Harry, standing rigid and isolated in a room full of judgmental eyes, felt the entire weight of the monarchy bear down upon him. The scrutiny was crushing, intensified by the carefully guarded yet transparent satisfaction visible on some faces. This was not merely an inheritance matter. It was a very public rebuke, a humiliating demotion from royal favor, designed to shame as much as to disinherit. Meanwhile, Prince William, who had inherited vast estates and private fortunes from the Queen, seemed burdened rather than pleased by his newfound wealth. Though royal etiquette demanded he remain expressionless, William's eyes briefly met Harry's, conveying an unreadable mixture of sympathy and disappointment. The brothers, once inseparable allies bonded by tragedy and public expectation, now stood divided by fate, inheritance, and a grandmother's decisive final judgment. As news of the Queen's dramatic will spread beyond palace gates, the world's media descended upon London in a frenzy of speculation and analysis. Headlines screamed the scandal from every major outlet across the globe. Social media erupted with heated debates, some sympathizing with Harry's plight, others fiercely condemning him as a royal traitor finally receiving his due. Hashtags trended, petitions formed, and royal experts weighed in with explosive theories and startling insights. This was not simply royal gossip. It was a seismic shift in the narrative of the British monarchy itself, a sign that even the most revered institutions could fracture under personal resentments and unresolved grievances. Suddenly, Prince Harry found himself not just disinherited, but at the epicenter of a storm that questioned the very foundation and future of the royal family. In the aftermath of William's dramatic reading, Harry withdrew from the gathered assembly, his movements heavy with shock and anger. Meghan followed closely behind, her presence a silent testament to their shared defiance in the face of institutional judgment. As they retreated into private quarters, the palace halls buzzed with speculation, servants whispering discreetly yet urgently about the implications of this unprecedented royal snub. Behind closed doors, Harry unleashed the anger he'd held in check publicly, his voice strained and his fists clenched in bitter frustration. This wasn't merely about money or property, it was a powerful emotional blow, a rejection from the woman whose support he had quietly craved even in his moments of rebellion. His voice broke with raw anguish as he spoke privately with trusted confidants, unable to fathom the severity of his grandmother's final act. Yet, as night fell upon London, and the palace lights dimmed to subdued solemnity, Harry knew that anger alone wouldn't be enough. This crisis demanded action, reflection, and perhaps even confrontation. The Queen's final act had thrown down a gauntlet, challenging Harry's choices, testing his resolve, and reshaping his identity in ways he never anticipated. If he was to weather this storm, he would need courage, resilience, and an unshakable commitment to his truth, whatever consequences that might bring. For viewers watching this unfold through the relentless coverage of every detail, every rumor, every leaked whisper, the drama of the British royal family was once again laid bare. Yet this was more than mere entertainment or scandal, it was a profound human drama, exposing the fragile bonds of family, the complexities of duty, and the painful consequences of personal choice. As the world watched and waited to see how Prince Harry would respond, one thing became crystal clear. This story was far from over. It was just beginning, a narrative rich with emotional intensity, palace intrigue, and implications powerful enough to shape the future of Britain's royal dynasty. On a dreary November morning, the sky over London was thick with slate-gray clouds, matching perfectly the somber mood inside Buckingham Palace. Rain pattered lightly against the towering windows, dripping down glass panes like silent tears as dignitaries, palace officials, and senior members of the royal family gathered solemnly in one of the grand drawing rooms. Today was not meant to be a joyous occasion, nor even one of conventional formality. It was instead a day heavy with historical significance, one that would forever alter the lives of those present, especially Prince Harry. Inside the drawing room, adorned with priceless art and gilded accents that spoke of centuries of tradition, every chair was meticulously placed, each guest seated in strict accordance with royal protocol. At the front stood Prince William, next in line to the British throne. The future king wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit, his features carefully arranged into neutrality, revealing nothing of his thoughts. He held a sealed envelope in his hands, its thick parchment and wax seal conveying a sense of gravity appropriate to the occasion. Prince Harry sat rigidly beside Meghan Markle, his posture unusually stiff and formal. His gaze was fixed forward, betraying none of the turmoil that swirled inside him. Though Harry and William had drifted apart in recent years, their relationship strained by Harry's decisions and public criticisms of the royal institution, no tension had ever matched the intensity felt today. The Queen's passing had been an emotional blow to both brothers, each privately mourning the grandmother who had anchored their tumultuous lives. Yet even in grief, Harry could never have imagined the magnitude of the storm awaiting him this day. As silence settled over the room, Prince William cleared his throat, breaking the thick tension. The envelope crackled as he broke the seal, the sound echoing softly in the hushed chamber. Every eye in the room locked onto him, their attention absolute. "I shall now read the final testament of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II," William announced, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of the moment. He began by reciting the formal, standard preamble. He spoke of duty, legacy, and the continuity of the monarchy, words familiar, predictable even. But beneath the composed exterior, subtle hints of nervousness began to emerge in William's tone, noticeable only to those who knew him best. As William reached the first bequests, it became clear that the Queen had left generous inheritances to many close relatives. Her will meticulously distributed properties, estates, financial assets, and personal treasures, each gift a testament to relationships nurtured over a lifetime. The Queen's daughter, Princess Anne, was bequeathed valuable family heirlooms, while King Charles received royal residences and personal writings of historical importance. Even minor royals and loyal palace staff were thoughtfully remembered. Each name announced was met with respectful nods, quiet murmurs of approval, and occasional discreet smiles. But Harry's heart began to race as William approached the section detailing the inheritances for the Queen's grandchildren. Every second seemed to stretch infinitely, each heartbeat louder and more insistent in Harry's chest. William's voice slowed noticeably as he arrived at the line that would alter the royal family's narrative forever. "To my grandson Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, I leave the residences of Sandringham House, Balmoral Estate, and Clarence House, along with private financial assets and investment portfolios detailed herein." William paused briefly, momentarily overcome by the enormity of what he had inherited. The sheer scale of the wealth and responsibility bestowed upon him was monumental. Then came the moment everyone unknowingly awaited. William's gaze flickered briefly toward Harry, a silent apology perhaps, before continuing. His voice faltered slightly, betraying the gravity of the next words. "To my grandson Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex," William's voice softened almost imperceptibly, "I leave nothing." The air was sucked from the room in an instant. Audible gasps filled the silence, followed by uncomfortable shifting and muted whispers of disbelief. Harry felt his blood turn cold, a sensation of numbness spreading from his chest to his fingertips. Meghan's fingers tightened their grip on his arm, her own breathing shallow, betraying her shock. William quickly cleared his throat and pressed on, desperate to finish the official reading without further emotional disruption. But the damage was already done. The impact of those simple yet devastating words resonated powerfully through the chamber, ricocheting through the collective consciousness of everyone present. As William concluded the reading, the room erupted into subdued yet urgent conversations, muffled by respectful protocol but charged with astonishment and speculation. Royal advisors exchanged meaningful glances, their minds rapidly calculating potential fallout and necessary diplomatic maneuvers. Family members eyed Harry discreetly, gauging his reaction, knowing this moment marked a profound turning point for the monarchy. Harry felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood, the eyes of the entire room boring into him. He had expected disapproval, perhaps even criticism from his grandmother, given their recent history. But total disinheritance was unimaginable, a clear, uncompromising rejection that questioned everything he had become. In a corner, royal biographers invited to record the day's events discreetly took notes, their expressions both stunned and intrigued. They knew immediately the historical significance of this unprecedented royal snub. This was not just family drama, it was a powerful public rebuke, signaling deeper cracks in the monarchy than most observers had previously believed possible. William, maintaining his composure admirably, finally lowered the will, his duty fulfilled. He glanced again at Harry, attempting to convey something sympathy, perhaps regret, but Harry's gaze was fixed elsewhere, deliberately avoiding his brother's eyes. The space between them, already vast, now felt insurmountable. Quietly, Harry rose from his seat, his movements deliberate yet revealing barely restrained emotion. Meghan rose silently with him, her expression guarded. Without a word to anyone, they began to leave, the whispers intensifying behind their backs. As they passed William, the brothers briefly locked eyes, pain, regret, and a hint of unresolved anger flashed between them, encapsulating decades of complicated history. Harry knew the weight of the decision he was making in leaving immediately, fully aware this gesture spoke louder than any words he could utter. His exit was not merely an act of wounded pride, it was a declaration, a rejection of the humiliation that had just unfolded before him. Yet deep inside, beneath the anger and disbelief, a profound sadness lingered, an ache that spoke to the fundamental human need for family approval, acceptance, and unconditional love. As the doors to the drawing room shut softly behind them, Harry and Meghan found themselves momentarily alone in the vast palace corridor. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the distant murmurs of ongoing discussion within the room they had just exited. Meghan turned to Harry, her expression a mixture of concern and fierce loyalty. Harry drew a long, shaking breath, finally allowing his composure to crack just slightly, revealing the depth of his pain. "I didn't expect this," he murmured quietly, his voice tinged with bitterness and disbelief. "Not from her." Meghan gently placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, offering silent strength and solidarity. No further words passed between them in that moment, yet none were needed. Both knew the road ahead would be difficult, fraught with media scrutiny, public judgment, and personal reflection. They were entering uncharted territory, forever altered by a few carefully chosen words from a departed monarch. Back in the drawing room, the royal family and assembled dignitaries continued their heated yet hushed conversations, debating the Queen's unprecedented decision. The shockwaves from her final wishes had only just begun to reverberate, promising far-reaching implications for the future of the monarchy and those within it. In the hours and days that would follow, the world would dissect every nuance of this historic event, drawing conclusions, assigning blame, and searching desperately for deeper meaning in the Queen's actions. But for Prince Harry, the meaning was already painfully clear. His grandmother, whom he had loved, respected, and challenged, had made her final verdict on his choices, and now it was left for him to pick up the pieces. As news of the will's contents began to spread beyond the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, the world reacted with a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. Headlines blazed across every major outlet, each one more sensational than the last. Prince Harry left with nothing, the Queen's final act of defiance, Prince William inherits royal fortunes, Harry cast aside, and Queen Elizabeth's shocking final snub to Harry were just some of the phrases splashed across screens and front pages. For days, speculation ran rampant. Reporters camped outside royal residences, news channels looped footage of Harry and Meghan leaving the palace, their faces taut with tension. Every royal commentator, biographer, and so-called expert was summoned to provide analysis. Some claimed it was a strategic move by the Queen to preserve the monarchy's assets within the United Kingdom, while others argued it was a symbolic gesture, a definitive stance against Harry's decisions in recent years. But no one truly knew the reasoning behind the Queen's decision, and that void of understanding only fueled more questions. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was equally charged. The Queen's decision was not simply a matter of inheritance, it was a reflection of long-simmering tensions that had brewed quietly behind closed doors for years. Harry's departure from royal duties, his candid interviews that had sent shockwaves through the establishment, and his public criticisms of the royal institution had not been without consequence. For some, the will's revelations were less of a shock and more of an inevitable conclusion. In private quarters, members of the royal family gathered for informal meetings, their conversations laced with both concern and judgment. Princess Anne, known for her straightforward demeanor, allegedly remarked to a confidant, "The Queen never did anything without reason." This was calculated. Her words, though spoken quietly, carried the weight of decades of royal experience. Others, like the Duke of Kent, expressed muted surprise but refrained from public comment, understanding well the implications of contradicting the Queen's final wishes. The will itself, carefully worded and sealed under the strictest confidentiality, had been drafted with legal precision. According to palace insiders, the Queen had revised her testament several times over the past decade, adjusting details based on evolving family dynamics. What few knew was that her final revision had been made just months before her passing, during a period of reflection and solitude at Balmoral. Some speculated that her decision was influenced by Harry's explosive interviews with global media, where he aired grievances against the institution and spoke openly about his personal struggles. To the Queen, whose lifelong philosophy centered around the motto, "Never complain, never explain," Harry's openness may have been seen as not just unwise, but unforgivable. Palace lawyers and royal advisors were tasked with executing the will's contents with the utmost precision. The document, they revealed, left William with substantial properties and assets. An inheritance that solidified his position not just as heir to the throne, but as a symbol of the monarchy's continuity and strength. Sandringham House, Balmoral Estate, and Clarence House now belonged to him, along with countless artifacts and heirlooms of incalculable value. In addition, William inherited private investments and financial holdings that would secure his family's wealth for generations. The will further stipulated that William would have control over several charitable trusts once overseen by the Queen. These included foundations dedicated to environmental conservation, youth empowerment, and education across the Commonwealth. It was a gesture that not only secured William's status but aligned him with causes that had long defined the Queen's reign. By contrast, Harry's exclusion was stark. The document mentioned his name only once, acknowledging his title but offering nothing in terms of material legacy. Not a property, not an artifact, not even a symbolic gesture of affection. The total omission was a statement as bold as any royal decree, an unmistakable sign of disapproval. The Queen's final act, etched in legal clarity, severed any claim Harry might have had to the tangible symbols of his royal birthright. Meghan Markle's reaction, as reported by close friends, was one of disbelief and fury. Having distanced themselves from royal duties in pursuit of financial independence, Meghan and Harry had nonetheless expected some form of acknowledgement from the Queen, a gesture of familial connection, if not forgiveness. But the coldness of the will spoke volumes. For Meghan, it was a confirmation of every suspicion she had held about royal intentions, a final blow that justified their departure from the institution. Harry, however, remained largely silent in public. Friends described him as reflective, even withdrawn. Those closest to him claimed he was processing not just the loss of inheritance, but the deeper symbolic implications of his grandmother's decision. For Harry, this was not merely a matter of finances. It was a severance from the institution he was born into, a clear message that his path now lay outside the protection and privilege of the monarchy. In stark contrast, William assumed his new responsibilities with the composed dignity expected of a future king. He made no public statement about his grandmother's decision, opting instead for a series of carefully planned appearances that highlighted his new role. Within weeks, William hosted meetings with the trustees of the royal estates, setting in motion restoration projects and charitable initiatives that further cemented his image as the rightful heir. There were no grand celebrations, no overt displays of wealth, only quiet acceptance of duty, underscored by an unspoken awareness of the shift in power dynamics. Palace insiders hinted at tense meetings behind closed doors, where Harry allegedly questioned the legality of the will, raising concerns over its last-minute amendments. Legal experts speculated on whether he had grounds for contestation, though history showed that royal wills, sealed under centuries-old traditions, were near impossible to challenge. Even if Harry pursued legal action, the implications of battling his family in court would be catastrophic, both for public perception and for his fragile relationship with his father and brother. Public reaction was split. In the United Kingdom, many saw the Queen's decision as justified, a reflection of Harry's perceived abandonment of royal duty. Tabloids praised the Queen's foresight, branding her choice as an act of royal preservation. Others, however, viewed it as a heartless snub, a vindictive punishment for a grandson who had dared to forge his own path. Social media platforms became battlegrounds for debate, with hashtags trending on both sides of the argument. Supporters of Harry voiced outrage over what they deemed a cruel act of rejection, while defenders of the monarchy hailed the Queen's decision as an act of strength and moral conviction. Internationally, the response was even more polarized. American media outlets, generally sympathetic to Harry and Meghan's plight, criticized the monarchy for its perceived rigidity and lack of familial compassion. Talk shows dissected the will line by line, while political commentators debated the broader implications for the Commonwealth. In Australia and Canada, former British territories still tied to the crown, the news sparked discussions about republicanism and the role of the monarchy in modern governance. For the royal family, however, the decision was final. William's inheritance marked a new era, solidifying his role as the face of the future monarchy. Inheritances had always been symbolic in royal circles, gestures that spoke to favor, approval, and legacy. By leaving Harry with nothing, the Queen had made her thoughts clear. Her faith lay with William, the heir she believed would secure the institution she had dedicated her life to preserving. Behind the palace walls, conversations turned to damage control. Advisors met regularly to strategize how best to handle the inevitable fallout. Official statements were drafted, then redrafted, each word carefully considered to avoid further controversy. King Charles, ever cautious and calculating, spoke minimally on the matter, his public appearances carefully managed to project unity and strength. But behind his reserved exterior, there were whispers of frustration. Some said Charles had pushed for reconciliation, that he had advocated for Harry to receive something, even if symbolic. Yet the Queen's word was final, her will legally unassailable, and Charles, like all those before him, was bound by the ironclad traditions of royal succession. As weeks passed, the initial shock of the announcement gave way to deeper analysis. Journalists and historians began to interpret the Queen's decision through the lens of history, likening it to other dramatic disinheritances within royal families across Europe. Discussions of legacy and loyalty dominated dinner tables and debate panels, as the world tried to make sense of what it all meant for the House of Windsor. For Harry, the choice was clear. Either he would accept his grandmother's final judgment and move forward, or he would challenge it, risking everything in the process. And for William, the weight of inheritance settled upon his shoulders, a crown yet unworn, but now undeniably his. The fallout from the will's reading had scarcely settled when Prince Harry made his first public appearance. The world waited with bated breath, reporters flocking to every public venue where he might emerge. When he finally stepped into the glaring lights of the media, his face was a mask of composure, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unrest. It was a charity event in Los Angeles, one he had agreed to months earlier, well before the storm that had now engulfed him. Cameras flashed relentlessly as he walked alongside Meghan Markle, their hands interlaced, their expressions steeled for the inevitable onslaught of questions. As expected, the swarm of reporters wasted no time. Shouted questions came from all directions, overlapping into a chaotic wall of noise. Harry maintained his silence, his jaw clenched tightly, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Meghan, poised yet visibly tense, mirrored his restraint. It wasn't until they reached the podium that the world heard Harry's voice crack through the tension that had been building for days. A hush fell over the room as he approached the microphone. The flashing lights of cameras softened, and the relentless buzz of whispered conversation stilled. For a moment, he simply stood there, scanning the room, his expression unreadable. He cleared his throat and began. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," he started, his voice firm yet carrying an undercurrent of emotion. "It's been a challenging week for my family and me, and I appreciate the respect and space that some of you have given us." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I'm here today because I made a promise to this charity, and that promise means something to me. But I know why most of you are here, and I won't pretend otherwise." The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the gravity of what was about to be addressed. Harry's eyes locked on a spot somewhere in the back of the room, as if grounding himself before delivering the words that had undoubtedly simmered beneath his silence since that fateful day at Buckingham Palace. "My grandmother was a remarkable woman," he began slowly, each word measured and deliberate. "Her dedication to duty, to family, and to the people of the Commonwealth was unwavering. I loved her deeply, and I still do. That will never change." His voice faltered for just a second, a flicker of vulnerability that he quickly suppressed. "But family is complicated. And sometimes, decisions are made that hurt, that confuse, that disappoint." There it was, the first crack in the carefully constructed wall of royal decorum. Reporters leaned forward, microphones thrust closer to catch every syllable. Harry continued, his tone hardening slightly. "I won't pretend to understand all the reasons behind the decisions that were made. I won't stand here and say it didn't hurt, because it did deeply." He paused, his eyes narrowing with determination. "But my focus now is on my family, on my children, on building something real, something that lasts beyond titles or inheritances." Meghan placed a gentle hand on his back, a subtle gesture of support that did not go unnoticed. He glanced her way briefly, offering a small nod before continuing. "What I will say," Harry added, his tone sharpening, "is that I remain committed to the work I've started, to the causes that matter to me, and to the legacy I want to create. My grandmother's decision does not define me. It does not decide my worth. And it certainly doesn't dictate my future." The room erupted in a flurry of camera flashes and murmurs. Harry stepped back from the microphone, clearly finished with his statement. He reached for Meghan's hand, their fingers entwining firmly, and the couple exited the stage with a measured grace that belied the chaos unfolding around them. Reporters continued to shout questions, demanding more answers, more clarity, but Harry and Meghan did not look back. Their expressions were set, their purpose clear. It was as if they had silently agreed to refuse the narrative thrust upon them. In the hours that followed, Harry's statement went viral. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions, some praising his strength and dignity, others condemning his perceived disrespect for royal tradition. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Harry speaks, hashtag royal rejection, and hashtag Queen snub. Commentators from across the globe weighed in, analyzing every word, every pause, every flicker of emotion that crossed his face during the speech. British tabloids, never known for their subtlety, pounced with sensational headlines. "Harry defies the Queen's will," screamed one front page, while another declared, "Harry rejects royal legacy, goes his own way." Editorials debated his choice of words, his body language, even his decision to bring Meghan to the event. Some heralded his bravery, calling him a symbol of modern independence. Others chastised him for what they called a blatant disregard for royal decorum. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American media outlets framed Harry's speech as a triumph of resilience over repression. Pundits praised his transparency, his willingness to address the elephant in the room head-on. Evening talk shows dissected his every phrase, playing back clips of his speech with enthusiastic commentary. For a moment, Harry was not just a prince. He was a symbol of defiance, of rebirth, of a new kind of royalty unbound by the chains of tradition. But within the walls of Buckingham Palace, the reaction was far less celebratory. Insiders described the mood as one of disbelief and thinly veiled outrage. A senior palace aide, speaking anonymously, remarked that Harry's comments were seen as wildly inappropriate, a breach of royal protocol that further strained the already fractured relationship. King Charles, according to whispers from royal staff, was said to be deeply disappointed by his son's decision to speak so publicly, particularly so soon after the Queen's passing. Prince William, whose role in the will reading had thrust him unwillingly into the center of the storm, maintained a dignified silence. He made no public statement, choosing instead to fulfill his scheduled engagements with stoic composure. Those close to him noted his visible strain, the weight of his newfound responsibilities pressing heavily upon his shoulders. Some speculated that William felt trapped between loyalty to his grandmother's wishes and the bond he once shared with his younger brother. Behind closed doors, discussions of damage control were swift and severe. Advisors scrambled to strategize the next public steps, fearing a widening rift that could fracture the royal family's image beyond repair. For decades, the institution had survived scandal and upheaval by maintaining a united front, but now that unity seemed perilously close to collapse. And then, of course, there was the question of legal recourse. Harry's reference to decisions that hurt was seen by many as a veiled threat, a hint that he might contest the will. Royal lawyers were reportedly on high alert, preparing for the possibility of a legal challenge that would drag the family's private affairs into public view. Some insiders whispered that Harry had already begun consulting with legal experts, exploring options that could potentially overturn or at least contest the Queen's decision. For Harry, however, the immediate focus remained on reclaiming his own narrative. The speech marked a turning point, a deliberate step away from the expectations and constraints that had long defined his existence. He spoke openly about his plans for new charitable ventures, hinting at projects focused on mental health, veteran support, and global outreach. To his supporters, it was a beacon of hope, proof that Harry could carve out a life of purpose and fulfillment outside the shadow of Buckingham Palace. But to his critics, it was yet another act of defiance, a continuation of his rejection of royal duty and tradition. Even as Harry spoke of family and legacy, whispers of discord grew louder, fueled by speculation and the media's relentless hunger for drama. His speech, though powerful, had not closed the chapter on his conflict with the monarchy. If anything, it had flung the doors wide open, inviting more scrutiny, more division, and more questions about what came next. One thing, however, was certain: Prince Harry was no longer willing to remain silent. And with that decision, the stage was set for a confrontation that would echo not just through the royal family, but across the world. The walls of Buckingham Palace had always been known for their stoic resilience, their capacity to endure storms of controversy and whispers of scandal. But in the wake of Harry's public statement, those very walls seemed to tremble under the weight of newfound tension. Within the grand halls and secret corridors of the palace, whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire among staff and royals alike. The Queen's final act of disinheritance had not only stunned the public, but left the royal family reeling, scrambling to understand the deeper implications of such a bold decision. Inside the palace, meetings were convened behind closed doors. Senior members of the royal family, along with key advisors and legal experts, gathered in confidential settings, each session marked by hushed tones and cautious glances. King Charles presided over these discussions with a solemn expression, his demeanor more measured than ever. The king's gaze remained steady, but those who knew him best saw the tension in his eyes, the slight tightening of his jaw as he spoke. It was clear that even for a man raised under the burdens of tradition and monarchy, the events unfolding were unprecedented. Princess, and ever the pragmatist, was one of the first to voice her concerns. According to sources close to the family, she had been uncharacteristically vocal during the initial meetings, stressing the importance of unity and damage control. "We cannot afford this kind of fracture," she reportedly said during one gathering, her voice firm and unyielding. "The monarchy has withstood wars, scandals, and rebellions. It cannot be undone by family disputes." Others were less optimistic. The Duke of Kent, with his decades of service and deep ties to royal tradition, expressed a more somber outlook. "This is not merely a family matter," he was overheard saying in one private discussion. "This is a matter of legacy, of history." The Queen's decision sends a message that will be scrutinized for generations. His words lingered in the room, settling uncomfortably upon those present. King Charles, despite his calm exterior, was notably quiet during these discussions. Those close to him speculated that his silence masked a deeper conflict. He had long advocated for reconciliation, even during the tumultuous days following Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties. But the Queen's final wishes, enshrined in legal clarity, had left him with little room to maneuver. To defy her testament would not only be unprecedented, but potentially catastrophic for the public perception of the monarchy's unity and integrity. Still, the king did not remain entirely passive. He arranged for private conversations with key advisors, focusing on potential paths forward. Some suggested reaching out to Harry directly, proposing a discreet meeting to discuss the ramifications of the will and to offer, if not a gesture of goodwill, at least a platform for dialogue. Others argued for a firmer stance, emphasizing that any sign of compromise would weaken the monarchy's resolve and encourage further public dissent. In the end, Charles listened carefully but committed to nothing, his decision shrouded in royal discretion. The Queen Consort, Camilla, remained largely in the background, her influence subtle yet present. Those within palace circles noted her increased presence at strategic meetings, her words carefully chosen yet impactful. Despite her polarizing reputation, Camilla had always understood the power of public perception. Privately, she was said to have advised Charles to maintain a united front, to project strength and unity at all costs. "The world is watching," she reportedly cautioned him. "We must not falter." Meanwhile, the corridors of the palace were thick with whispers. Staff exchanged furtive glances, their conversations clipped and cautious. For many, the Queen's decision marked a departure from the unspoken traditions that had governed royal inheritances for centuries. The royal will, typically sealed and kept private, had now become a matter of public spectacle, its contents dissected by every tabloid and media outlet across the globe. The legal implications were another matter entirely. Lawyers for the royal family were engaged in near-constant discussions, poring over the Queen's final testament, ensuring every clause and stipulation was legally airtight. Royal wills, unlike those of ordinary citizens, were bound by centuries-old protocols designed to protect the privacy and sanctity of the monarchy. But Harry's public statements hinted at dissatisfaction, perhaps even a willingness to contest the will. This possibility sent ripples of anxiety through the palace's legal team, prompting swift and decisive action. Advisors close to Charles recommended reinforcing legal protections, revisiting any potential loopholes that could be exploited should Harry decide to mount a challenge. The mere thought of a courtroom battle, of Windsor versus Windsor, was enough to send chills through the ranks of royal officials. It would be a scandal of unprecedented scale, a public unraveling of royal secrets that had been carefully guarded for generations. Outside the palace, the media circus grew louder by the day. Reporters camped outside the gates, their cameras trained on every entrance, every flicker of movement behind the iron bars. The world wanted answers. Why had the Queen made such a drastic decision, and what would Harry do next? Morning talk shows, evening broadcasts, and countless online forums buzzed with speculation. Royal commentators and so-called insiders provided a constant stream of theories, some grounded in historical context, others wild with conspiracy and conjecture. Public opinion was fiercely divided. Loyalists praised the Queen's decision as an act of strength and moral clarity, a necessary move to protect the integrity of the monarchy. They saw Harry's departure from royal duties and his public criticisms as acts of betrayal, warranting the consequences he now faced. The Queen did what was right for the crown, one prominent columnist wrote. Her legacy is one of loyalty and duty, and she has passed that legacy on to William, where it belongs. But others were less forgiving. Across the Atlantic, particularly in the United States, media outlets framed the disinheritance as a cruel and calculated snub. Evening news anchors spoke of generational divides, of outdated traditions clashing with modern sensibilities. Talk show hosts debated the ethics of royal wealth, questioning the morality of hoarding such vast fortunes while a family member was left with nothing. Social media became a battlefield of opinion, with hashtags like #SupportHarry and #MonarchyJustice trending for days. Even amongst the royal family, opinions were split. Some privately voiced sympathy for Harry, acknowledging the emotional toll of his exclusion. One unnamed royal source was quoted as saying, "He's still family, no matter what. This should have been handled differently." Others, however, remained steadfast in their belief that the Queen's decision was justified. "This is about loyalty, about duty," remarked a close confidant of the royal family. Harry made his choice. The Queen simply made hers. As days turned into weeks, the intensity of the fallout showed no signs of slowing. The royal family's public appearances became more scrutinized than ever. Every gesture, every expression was analyzed for hidden meaning, for signs of unity or discord. When William and Kate stepped out for their first public engagement since the reading of the will, the press was quick to note their poised composure, their visible unity. But questions lingered. Was the facade of solidarity masking deeper cracks? Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan's absence from royal events grew more pronounced. Their retreat to California, initially framed as a break from royal duties, now felt more like a permanent exile. The distance, both physical and emotional, seemed insurmountable. And yet, the world waited, breathless with anticipation, to see what Harry would do next. Would he contest the will? Would he break his silence and launch a full-scale media campaign to tell his side of the story? Or would he retreat further into private life, choosing family over legacy? Inside Buckingham Palace, preparations continued as if nothing had changed. Banquets were held, dignitaries were received, and royal duties carried on with the meticulous precision expected of the monarchy. But behind the polished exterior, a quiet tension simmered, threatening to spill over at any moment. And as the days passed, it became increasingly clear that the Queen's final act had set the stage for a confrontation unlike any the royal family had faced in its modern history. Amidst the storm that followed the reading of Queen Elizabeth's will, Prince William found himself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight. Unlike Harry, whose reaction had been immediate and public, William maintained a stoic silence, attending his royal duties with the poise expected of a future king. But behind the closed doors of Kensington Palace, the weight of his grandmother's decision bore down upon him with unrelenting pressure. William had always known that his role as heir to the throne came with certain privileges and responsibilities. From a young age, he had been groomed for leadership, his path set in stone from the moment of his birth. He understood the expectations that came with his title, the sacrifices required to uphold the image and integrity of the monarchy. But even he had not anticipated the magnitude of what was handed to him that day in Buckingham Palace. Sandringham House, Balmoral Estate, Clarence House, each name represented more than just property. They were symbols of tradition, of legacy, of the continuity of the British monarchy. Balmoral especially had been the Queen's cherished retreat, a place of solitude and reflection. To be handed stewardship over these estates was both an honor and a tremendous burden. William knew that with such inheritance came not just wealth, but the guardianship of history. These properties were more than just buildings. They were the backdrop of royal life for generations. Weddings, state visits, family holidays, memories etched into the very walls. Now, he was tasked with preserving that legacy. But with every congratulatory handshake and whispered word of support from advisors and palace staff, there lingered the shadow of what his newfound fortune represented. William was acutely aware of the whispers that circulated in palace corridors, the murmurs of favoritism, of division. Some claimed that the Queen's decision was a statement of faith in William's character, a testament to his loyalty and dedication. Others, more critical, whispered of family politics, of a rift so deep it had finally cracked the veneer of royal unity. In the days that followed the will's reading, William's schedule was packed with public appearances, each one more scrutinized than the last. He visited charities, met with community leaders, and attended state functions with a practiced grace that belied the turmoil brewing behind the scenes. Cameras followed his every step, flashing relentlessly as he shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and smiled dutifully for the crowd. His composure never wavered, but those closest to him noted the subtle signs of strain and an uncharacteristic tension in his shoulders, a fleeting look of fatigue that crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. Kate, ever the pillar of support, stood by his side through every engagement. Her presence was steady, reassuring, the perfect complement to William's reserved strength. Together, they presented an image of stability, of unity in the face of upheaval. Yet, within the privacy of their own quarters, the strain of recent events was undeniable. William confided in her, sharing his concerns about the impact of the Queen's decision, not just on Harry, but on the entire royal family. Kate listened patiently, offering words of encouragement, reminding him of his duty, of the greater purpose that came with his position. But even she could not deny the reality that lay before them. The decision had been made, and its consequences were already beginning to unfold. Their role now was to move forward, to represent the monarchy with dignity and strength, even as the foundations of their family seemed to shift beneath them. Palace insiders spoke of late-night meetings at Kensington Palace, strategy sessions aimed at managing the narrative that had erupted following the will's revelation. William was meticulous, determined to handle the matter with the utmost respect for his grandmother's wishes. He refused to speak ill of Harry publicly, even when prodded by the press. His responses were measured, carefully constructed to convey solidarity and unity, despite the evident fracture. William's inner circle advised him to continue with royal duties as usual, to project an image of strength and continuity. The crown must not falter, one senior aide reportedly advised him. This is about legacy, about tradition. Your role now is to ensure that nothing disrupts that. And so William pressed on, attending every event, hosting every function with a smile and a firm handshake, projecting the image of a future king prepared to lead. But in the quiet moments, when the cameras were gone and the public eye was no longer upon him, William struggled with the enormity of it all. He had not asked for his brother's exclusion, nor had he lobbied for his own ascension of assets. His loyalty to his grandmother was absolute, his respect for her decisions unwavering. Yet, the sense of loss lingered, an unspoken grief that haunted him in the stillness of the night. He missed his brother, missed the camaraderie they once shared before the titles, before the rift. Their bond, forged through shared tragedy and familial duty, now seemed irreparably fractured. There were moments of quiet reflection, often during his solitary walks through the gardens of Kensington, where William allowed himself to grieve what had been lost. He had always been the responsible one, the steady hand to Harry's more impulsive nature. But even he had not foreseen the magnitude of their separation. It was one thing to live in different countries, to pursue different paths. It was another entirely to witness the severing of ties laid bare for the world to see. Despite his private sorrow, William remained committed to his role. In the days that followed, he began the daunting task of assuming control over the estates he had inherited. Meetings were held with financial advisors, estate managers, and legal teams to discuss the transition of ownership. William was resolute, determined to honor his grandmother's legacy with the same commitment she had shown throughout her reign. Restoration projects were planned for Sandringham, conservation efforts expanded at Balmoral. He took on these responsibilities with a sense of purpose, a quiet dignity that spoke to his character. For the public, William's steady hand was a symbol of continuity. His appearances were marked by expressions of gratitude and support. Crowds gathered to catch a glimpse of the prince who would one day be king, applauding his composure and commitment to duty. To many, he embodied the very ideals that the monarchy sought to uphold: stability, tradition, and loyalty. But even as he fulfilled his duties, the shadow of his brother's absence loomed large. Questions persisted. Would Harry contest the will? Would the rift between the brothers ever heal? William offered no answers, choosing instead to focus on the path laid out before him. He knew that any misstep would not only reflect on him, but on the institution his grandmother had dedicated her life to preserving. For now, William walked the line with practiced precision, a future king holding steady amidst the storm. He was determined to rise above the chaos, to honor the legacy left to him with grace and integrity. But beneath the polished surface, the scars of division remained, etched into his heart as a reminder of the cost of duty and the fragility of family. While the halls of Buckingham Palace simmered with quiet tension and whispered conversations, across the Atlantic in California, the atmosphere was anything but reserved. Meghan Markle's reaction to the contents of the Queen's will was swift and unmistakable. Those close to her described a mixture of disbelief and outrage, emotions that spilled over into every conversation in the days that followed the revelation. The estate in Montecito, where Meghan and Harry had built their new life, was a flurry of activity. Friends, advisors, and close confidants came and went, each arrival adding to the growing momentum of speculation and strategy. Meghan, typically poised and composed in public appearances, was visibly shaken behind closed doors. Her inner circle reported that she had not anticipated the Queen's decision to be so final, so public, and so absolute. In the first few days after the announcement, Meghan remained largely silent, opting instead to focus her energy on her children and household. But her frustration grew as the media swarmed around their property, eager for any sign of reaction. Tabloid helicopters buzzed overhead, capturing aerial views of the estate, while paparazzi lined the narrow streets leading to their secluded neighborhood. Meghan, no stranger to media scrutiny, responded by increasing security and limiting her public appearances. The gates to their estate, once relatively accessible to friends and visitors, were now locked down with the vigilance of a fortress. For Meghan, the Queen's decision felt deeply personal. It wasn't just about inheritance, it was a public declaration of disapproval. She had always been acutely aware of her strained relationship with certain members of the royal family, but she had believed that time would heal those wounds, that perhaps distance would foster reconciliation. The will, however, spoke differently. It was a message, one etched in the finality of legal clarity, that there would be no gesture of goodwill, no symbol of reconciliation. It left her husband, a prince by birth, with nothing, not a family heirloom, not a piece of property, not even a personal letter of affection from his grandmother. Friends of Meghan spoke to the press anonymously, revealing her private conversations. "She's absolutely stunned," one close friend shared. "She always knew things were tense, but to be left with nothing? That's a message. That's not just oversight, that's intentional." Another source claimed that Meghan viewed the decision as a calculated snub, a way to further isolate Harry from his family and diminish his standing. "It's a control mechanism," the source continued. "The monarchy is sending a clear message about where their loyalties lie, and it's not with Harry." In the days following the announcement, Meghan reportedly took several private meetings with legal advisors. Although Harry had not publicly stated his intention to challenge the will, speculation grew that Meghan was exploring legal avenues to contest the decision. Family law experts and estate attorneys were seen arriving at their estate, adding fuel to the fire of media speculation. Despite the airtight nature of royal wills, which are often sealed and protected from public scrutiny, Meghan seemed determined to explore every possible option. The tension spilled over into public appearances. Meghan, typically known for her grace and ease in front of the camera, was noticeably more reserved during her next public event. She attended a charity gala in Los Angeles, dressed impeccably as always, but the usual radiance that accompanied her smile seemed muted. Reporters shouted questions as she stepped from the car, cameras flashing in rapid succession. "Meghan, will you contest the will? How does Harry feel about being left out? Was this decision expected?" Meghan offered no response, her expression carefully composed, eyes fixed straight ahead as she walked the carpet with Harry by her side. Harry's demeanor was equally guarded. The couple maintained a united front, their hands clasped tightly together as they made their way into the event hall. But insiders noted the tension in Harry's jaw, the way his eyes seemed to scan the crowd with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. It was clear that whatever private conversations had transpired between him and Meghan in the wake of the announcement, they were still processing the weight of it all. During the gala, Meghan delivered a speech on the importance of community and unity, her voice steady but layered with unspoken emotion. Those present noted the thinly veiled references to family and support networks. "In times of great change," she began, her eyes sweeping over the attentive audience, "we must rely on those who stand beside us, those who believe in us, and those who refuse to let us stand alone." Her words were met with applause, but for those who understood the deeper context, the implications were clear. Meghan was sending a message, subtle yet pointed, that family went beyond bloodlines, that loyalty transcended titles and inheritance. The media, ever voracious, dissected every second of Meghan's appearance. Headlines blared with speculation. Meghan hints at royal betrayal during speech, Markle defiant amidst Queen's last snub, and Harry and Meghan plot next move after royal ouster. Social media platforms ignited with debate, supporters rallying behind Meghan's apparent strength and critics accusing her of stoking division. Hashtags like #MeghanFightsBack and #RoyalDivide began trending, sparking heated discussions on both sides of the Atlantic. Behind the scenes, Meghan's legal consultations continued. Lawyers reportedly briefed her on the nuances of British estate law, the complexities of challenging a royal will, and the implications of taking such a matter to court. It was an uphill battle, and Meghan was well aware of the limitations. Royal wills, particularly those of monarchs, were shrouded in secrecy, protected by tradition and law. Contesting them was practically unheard of, and the chances of success were slim. But Meghan's resolve did not waver. To her, this was not merely about wealth. It was about principle, about legacy, and about standing firm in the face of what she perceived as injustice. The tension also bled into Harry and Meghan's daily life. Neighbors reported increased security measures around their Montecito estate, more patrol cars circling the premises, and heightened surveillance. Even their public outings became more guarded, their appearances more calculated. For Meghan, this was a pivotal moment, a chance to stand by her husband in the face of unprecedented public rejection, to support him as he navigated the emotional labyrinth left in the wake of his grandmother's decision. Despite the escalating scrutiny, Meghan remained publicly supportive of Harry. Friends of the couple noted her steadfast loyalty, her unwavering commitment to shielding him from the harsh glare of public judgment. "She's his rock," one insider revealed. "Whatever happens next, she's going to be right there by his side, fighting alongside him." That's not going to change. In the days that followed, Meghan began organizing private meetings with their charitable foundations, refocusing efforts on community outreach and mental health initiatives. It was her way of pushing forward, of demonstrating resilience in the face of adversity. For her, the Queen's decision was not just a setback. It was a challenge, a call to redefine what legacy truly meant, independent of palace walls and royal decrees. Even as Meghan channeled her energy into public work and private legal strategy, the world watched with eager anticipation. Would she and Harry fight back, challenge the will, and risk further alienation from the royal family? Or would they retreat, choosing instead to build their lives away from the shadow of Buckingham Palace? The answers remained unclear, but one thing was certain: Meghan Markle would not go quietly. She was prepared to stand her ground, for Harry, for her children, and for the legacy they intended to build together. The announcement of Queen Elizabeth's will, followed by Prince Harry's complete disinheritance, ignited a media firestorm unlike anything seen in recent royal history. News networks across the globe dedicated hours of coverage to dissecting the implications, unraveling the motivations, and speculating on the fallout. Headlines screamed from every corner of the world: Prince Harry cut off, royal drama unfolds, Queen's final blow to Harry, a legacy of loyalty or punishment, and monarchy divided. William inherits it all, Harry left with nothing. The story was everywhere, saturating every major outlet, dominating the front pages of newspapers, and flooding social media platforms with relentless intensity. In the United Kingdom, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Royal commentators, many of whom had long followed the tumultuous relationship between Harry, Meghan, and the rest of the royal family, took to their platforms with fervor. Piers Morgan, never one to shy away from controversy, dedicated an entire segment of his primetime show to the decision, branding it as a bold move by the Queen, a final act of loyalty to the crown. He argued that Harry's choice to step back from royal duties justified the exclusion, framing it as a necessary move to protect the sanctity of the monarchy. Others were less forgiving. Prominent voices like Jeremy Vine questioned the harshness of the decision, calling it an unprecedented snub that would likely deepen the rift between the brothers. Vine pointed out that in royal history, even exiled members of the family were often left with some form of inheritance, a gesture of goodwill, if not outright acceptance. But to be completely cut out? That was something the public had not seen in modern times. Across the Atlantic, American media adopted a markedly different tone. Morning shows like Good Morning America and The Today Show framed the Queen's decision as a cold rebuke, a final rejection that underscored the family's unwillingness to modernize. Political commentators and celebrity analysts alike dissected the implications, with many viewing it as a symbolic punishment for Harry's choice to step away from the monarchy and live freely with Meghan Markle. Talk show hosts voiced their support for the Sussexes, praising their courage to forge their own path, independent of royal expectations. The story took on a life of its own on social media. Twitter became a battlefield of opinion, with hashtags like #SupportHarry and #RoyalDivide trending globally for days. Tweets poured in by the millions, some condemning the Queen's decision as outdated and punitive, while others celebrated her commitment to preserving tradition and honoring those who remained loyal. Memes and parodies circulated rapidly, some depicting Harry standing outside the gates of Buckingham Palace with a suitcase, while others showed the Queen writing her will with a defiant smile. The internet, in its typical fashion, turned a moment of familial heartbreak into both satire and serious debate. Instagram saw an outpouring of support for Harry and Meghan. Influencers posted messages of solidarity, sharing stories of estrangement and resilience, often tagged with supportive messages for the couple. Celebrities also weighed in. George Clooney, a vocal supporter of the Sussexes, tweeted his disbelief, calling the decision an unimaginable blow. Oprah Winfrey, whose explosive interview with Harry and Meghan had previously shaken the monarchy, posted a cryptic message about strength through adversity, which many took as a nod of support to the couple. Meanwhile, British tabloids unleashed a barrage of stories, each one more sensational than the last. The Daily Mail ran a series of features on the Queen's decision, accompanied by long-form op-eds debating whether Harry had indeed brought this upon himself. The Sun took a more dramatic approach, publishing exclusive interviews with supposed palace insiders who hinted that the Queen's decision had been months in the making, driven by her desire to safeguard the monarchy from scandal and betrayal. The Telegraph adopted a more measured tone, questioning the long-term impact of the decision on the unity of the family and its image abroad. Palace spokespeople were swift to release carefully worded statements, each one designed to project unity and calm amidst the chaos. An official announcement from Buckingham Palace described the Queen's decision as in alignment with long-standing principles of the monarchy, emphasizing the importance of tradition and continuity. There were no further details offered, no elaboration on the reasoning behind Harry's exclusion. The statement, while diplomatically composed, did little to quell the tide of speculation. Political figures, too, began to weigh in. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, when asked during a press conference about the royal fallout, carefully sidestepped the question, calling it a matter for the royal family, while emphasizing the importance of unity and respect. His response was widely criticized as evasive, with commentators accusing him of sidestepping a crucial public issue. In contrast, opposition leader Keir Starmer expressed his sympathy for Harry, calling for understanding and reconciliation in the face of deeply personal matters. The global fascination with the story reached fever pitch when Harry and Meghan were spotted attending a charity event just days after the announcement. Cameras captured every second of their arrival, focusing on Meghan's steely gaze and Harry's tense expression. Speculation grew rampant as body language experts were paraded across morning shows, analyzing the subtle cues that hinted at their emotional state. Was Harry angry? Was Meghan holding back tears? Theories multiplied with each passing hour. As the world dissected every detail, Harry's potential response became the topic of intense speculation. Would he contest the will? Royal commentators debated the logistics of such a move, questioning whether he had legal grounds to challenge a royal testament protected by centuries-old traditions. Legal analysts appeared on primetime television to explain the complexities of British inheritance law, detailing the near impossibility of overturning a monarch's final wishes. Still, rumors persisted that Harry was consulting with legal teams, exploring every possible avenue for retribution. But beyond the media circus and political commentary, the real impact was felt within the royal family itself. Insiders reported strained conversations between William and his father, King Charles, as the two navigated the fallout. Charles, by many accounts, was deeply troubled by the public reaction, concerned that the growing divide might cause irreparable damage to the monarchy's reputation. William, however, was resolute, his focus entirely on upholding the Queen's final wishes. "We must stay the course," he was reported to have said during a private conversation. "The crown is bigger than all of us." For Harry and Meghan, the relentless media scrutiny became both a burden and a platform. Their names dominated headlines, their images plastered across every news channel and tabloid in circulation. While some saw this as a testament to their influence, others viewed it as yet another example of the couple's estrangement from the traditions that once bound them. Yet through it all, Harry remained silent, his response reserved for private moments and quiet reflection. The media frenzy showed no signs of abating, and as the world watched and waited for Harry's next move, one thing became abundantly clear. This was more than just a familial rift. It was a defining moment for the monarchy, a test of tradition versus modernity, loyalty versus